Hello everyone and welcome back to Art History Shorts. So last week I talked about the artist Richard Diebenkorn and mentioned how he participated in the color field art movement. For this video this week I wanted to talk about the artist that immediately comes to my mind when I think of color field paintings, and that's Helen Frankenthaler. The color field movement can be thought about as a movement within abstract expressionism. The pioneers of color field were primarily focused on the expressive power of color. To get the full expression of the color, they often worked in large formats, looking to overwhelm and envelop the viewer. Frankenthaler approached color field with her own style and developed the soak stain technique. This involved pouring out thinned out paint across an untreated canvas, where it worked more as a wash, staining the canvas and bleeding across the natural fibers. She first used this technique on her painting Mountains and Sea, done in 1952. With using an unprimed canvas, there's this wonderful balance of intent and accident here. She was able to place the paint where she wanted, but then she wouldn't be able to control the staining of the canvas. The absorbency was out of her control. It's almost as if the painter and her materials were co-creating artwork. Her style and her work are very different from the artists attributed with the beginning of color field, like Mark Rothko, Barnett Newman, and Clifford Still. When you compare Frankenthaler's first soak stain, Mountains and Sea, with these works, the difference is obvious. Instead of stark blocks of color, we see colors that dance, that have movement, that are freed from the canvas, allowed to blend back in space or come forward with brightness. There is a spontaneity in her work as opposed to the controlled preciseness of these others. Her work did evolve to larger canvases with larger blocks of color, but overall, they never quite lost the same qualities of movement, freedom, and openness that we saw in Mountains and Sea. Let's take a closer look at this painting. Frankenthaler was inspired after visiting the Nova Scotia coast and created this piece, which can be seen as an abstract landscape. We can interpret the washes of blue as the Atlantic Ocean and other sections as the rocky shoreline. There are two things that strike me about this painting, and that is the color palette she used and the way she combined line and color for this composition. We get these wonderful outlines of sections of color that remind me of how Matisse, for example, would sometimes outline his figures. The way she delineates these sections of colors from each other with lines is another difference from the other color field painters I mentioned earlier as well. The sections of color are organic and natural, fitting together harmoniously as part of a whole. This natural feel enfolds the nature of the mountains and sea. The soft muted colors of this piece are as harmonious as the shapes they create. They are all in the same tonal family, which is very pleasing for the eye. Frankenthaler's soak stain approach also inspired other abstract artists. Kenneth Nolan and Morris Louis both went on to try her approach of laying down color on the canvas. I hope you enjoyed this brief look at Helen Frankenthaler's Mountains and Sea. I will no doubt be discussing more of her work in the future, so I really hope you did. If you enjoyed, please consider subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you next time.